on the property. But the land sale was circulated with all of our department heads, and there was no comments or concerns identified. So basically, it is a recommendation of the Finance Committee, and I so move that bylaw 16-8641 be given second reading.
Moved by Councillor Budds, seconded by Councillor Draycott. Any questions? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And that bylaw 16-8641 be given third reading, finally passed, signed, and sealed.
Moved by Councillor Budds and seconded by Councillor Draycott. All those in favor? That's carried.
And in my committee report, the only thing I had to deal with was that hearing, so that concludes my committee report as well.
Thank you, Councillor Budds. City Planning, Economic Development, Councillor Dreger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This committee reviewed the January building reports as submitted by the Planning District at our last committee meeting, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Public Safety Committee, Councillor.
Community Service.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Community Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a new portfolio. We have one item. It's a grant request for an outdoor. One item. A grant request to support an outdoor rink development that's actually already happened and is now melting. But in retrospect, I guess, it's been a great project, and the folks that pulled it off are asking for some support. City of Portage Prairie's outdoor rink grant policy has been in effect since 1998. The purpose of the policy is to provide a maximum grant of $500 to assist neighborhoods to create and maintain an outdoor skating rink for community use. An outdoor rink grant application has been received from Justin McCabe for Crescent Lake, specifically the skating path. Although the city's policy stipulates that an application be made prior to starting an outdoor rink project, the skating path had already been created before an application was received. The $500 grant would be used to assist with the costs of maintaining the path. That would be fuel costs for the scraping and flooding, maintenance of equipment, etc. As per policy, the applicant has provided the names, addresses, and signatures of 10 adults living in the proximity of their rink who are prepared to be responsible to ensure policy compliance. The scheduling of flooding and snow clearing of the rinks will depend on the weather and the volunteers scheduled. Portage Community Revitalization Corporation will administer the funds for the project, and the applicant will be required to enter into an agreement and provide the city with sufficient proof of expenditure prior to the release of approved funding. At the end of the season, the applicant will be required to return the site to its original state, and I believe that's already been done. So it is a recommendation of the Community Services Department that the Council of the City of Portage Prairie approve the outdoor rink grant request in the amount of up to $500 for the Crescent Lake skating path, subject to receipt of expenditure invoices, with the funds to be administered by the Portage Community Revitalization Corporation. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Fraze, seconded by Councillor Dreger. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And that's the only item that I had on the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Fraze. Waterworks Committee.
One item there on the comment from the committee meeting that I had asked administration, is that changed the policy expected for next year? It is? Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall, please.
Yes, Your Worship. This evening we have an award of a contract for biosolids land application. Tender documents were released for the removal and land application of biosolids from the Water Pollution Control Facility. Copies were sent directly to 9 companies, as well as advertised on the City of Portage website and on the Citizens Information page in the Herald Leader. Tender was open on Tuesday, February 16, 2016. This work involves the removal of approximately 1,400 dry tons of solid material from the bulk volume fermenter, as well as 2 biosolid storage tanks as biosolids. The biosolids are transported and injected onto farmland as fertilizer. The 2016 budget includes 1,400 dry tons to be removed at $420 per dry ton, for a total cost of $588,000 plus GST. The actual volume of biosolids to be removed will be determined as the storage tanks are emptied. Assiniboine Injections Limited has been the provider of biosolids land application services for the City of Portage for over 13 years, and administration has been satisfied with the quality of service that's been provided. Their bid price in 2015 was $556,395, GST included. The reduction in pricing this year is largely due to the reduced cost of fuel. The recommendation is, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage-La Prairie award the contract for the land application of biosolids for the 2016 season to Assiniboine Injections Limited at a cost of $336.90 plus GST per dry ton for an estimated 1,400 dry tons, which equates to $495,243, GST included.
Moved by Councillor Wall, seconded by Councillor Dreger. Any comments or questions on the motion? Councillor Buds.
When we look at the report, there is a very significant difference between the people that we're recommending the award the tender to and the other individual that submitted a price. And while that's good for us, it leads me to question whether or not, both parties had the same information. I'm sure they did, but to come up with such a varying difference of over $300,000. Any feeling on concerns that we could be looking at an additional cost as we go through this process or not?
None whatsoever. These folks have done it, as we said, for 13 years and are very good at what they do. We've never had additional costs. And this price is right in line with previous years, so
Okay.
I'm quite satisfied.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Any further items from Waterworks, Councillor Wall?
That's all I have, Your Worship.
Oh, thank you. Transportation Committee, Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Transportation Committee has nothing to report this evening.
And Public Safety Committee.
Public Safety Committee has nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. We have no deferred business. We do have new business. The first item is rezoning, bylaw 16-8643. Councillor Dreger.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is an application from CHB Development to rezone a property to R3 residential multifamily. And outlined there are some specifics that they must adhere to when rezoning in an existing neighborhood and also when developing an infill property. The application has been circulated to the province for review and comment after first reading. And as per Section 74(1) of the Planning Act, Council shall indicate its intention to enact a zoning bylaw amendment by giving first reading and proceed with public notice as set out in Section 168. First reading of bylaw number 16-8643 will commence the process as defined in the Planning Act in considering this application. It is the recommendation of your committee that the Council of the City of Portage-La Prairie give bylaw number 16-8643 first reading and provide public notices as defined in Section 168 of the Planning Act. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Dreger, seconded by Councillor Buds. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. And the second item is also Ec Development. Councillor Dreger.
Yes, this is another item that has already received first reading and went back to the Planning District for a hearing, and that happened in February. So the hearing took place at the Planning District office, and the decision and order by the board was that upon considering the presentations, the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw are not contrary to the development plan zoning bylaw or the Planning Act and are not incompatible with any other use in the area. Therefore, the board has found no reason to deny the passage of the proposed bylaw. It is the recommendation that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the application to rezone the land known as 103 11th Street Northwest and legally described as Lot 259, Plan 13, Parish of Portage la Prairie, from R1 Residential Single Family Zone to R2 Residential Two Family Zone, and that bylaw number 15-8640 be read a third time, finally passed, signed, and sealed. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Before we adjourn, we have question period. So for folks that are in the gallery, anybody from the gallery can get up and ask a question related to this evening's agenda. And we welcome your questions if you have any. No? Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, well, council is adjourned at 6:18 p.m. and we're going to move right into committee, and everybody is welcome to attend committee. This is open to the public and it's open to the media. So just in case there's any contrary stories out there, it is open. The first committee is Finance, Legislative, and Property Committee. Councillor Buds.
Thank you. The only item that will be up for discussion this evening is the organizational bylaw that is concerning question period itself. And I know Her Worship had mentioned tonight that the questions that could come from the gallery were to pertain only to tonight's agenda. And if you recall, there was a great discussion at our last council meeting over how we expand that. So the recommendation that was presented that night and what we need to discuss through committee here today is how we word that. And simply, I think the recommendation that night was just to remove the phrase at or in relation to the current agenda. So we removed that item. And since then, I know there's been some research done through administration and more specifically through the mayor, where we wanted to suggest some additional parameters on there. And so I'll just read some of the information that was shared. The minutes of, or some research was done with the city of Brandon. And in their city, they do have had a question period for quite some time. And it is limited to items that are on the agenda, just FYI. But there is a section in there that does create some control mechanisms for the chair of the meeting, and I think it's important, and I'll read them. So the mayor may interrupt and deny any further right of a person to ask questions under question period during a meeting of council if, in his or her opinion, the person does not speak respectfully of Her Majesty the Queen or the official representatives of her government, uses offensive words in referring to any member of council or to any official or an employee of the municipality or member of the public, shouts, immoderately raises his or her voice, uses profane, vulgar, or offensive language. So put some parameters on, this is the end of question period, if this is how, the direction where the questions are headed. I support the mayor's addition to the org bylaw that includes this, but it is up for discussion here this evening. Is there any other comments before we kind of give administration some friendly amendments before this gets to council?
They sound reasonable to me.
So everyone would be okay if we added that to the proposal that's brought forth at our next meeting?
I agree.
So I think we've got some consensus on that issue. Is there any other discussion on it?
I did have one other suggestion, and that was the time of the question period, and I would suggest moving it till the end of committee. And part of the reason for that, in the past, we've had folks attend committee and at times thought they could speak or ask council questions during committee, which they can't. However, by having question period right on the heels of committee, that gives anything that's discussed, people immediately afterwards can get up and incorporate that into their questions if they so wish.
Yeah, and that was previously not available as the questions pertain just to the meeting, right? So, yeah, that's the other friendly amendment, is to move it from the end of council to the end of committee.
I would support that as well. I think it just makes logical sense because sometimes what we do see is people that would like to address things that we just discussed in committee before we make a final decision. So it would just make sense to move that.
Okay, we'll ask administration to make those amendments to what we'll be bringing forth for approval at council next meeting. And I have nothing else on my committee report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buds. Economic Development, Councillor Dreger, please.
I have one item on the agenda as well, and this is a variation request from NestNet Limited. NestNet has been in council several times regarding this same property, and I guess as they're making plans to build, they're running across a few challenges and also are making some changes in their building. So they have further asked to allow for the rear yard requirement to be reduced, the interior side yard requirement to be reduced, and the corner side yard requirement on Dufferin Avenue East and 9th Street East to also be reduced. So we will be making a decision on that in a couple of weeks from now. Is there any questions? That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dreger. And Community Services report, Councillor Fraze. We'll get it straight this time.
Thank you, Worship. Community Services Committee has nothing to report tonight.
Thank you. Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall.
Waterworks Committee has nothing, Your Worship.
Transportation Committee, Councillor Draycott.
Transportation Committee has nothing to report this evening.
Thank you. And Public Safety, again, Councillor Fraze, please.
Thank you. And speaking on behalf of Councillor Espy, there's nothing to report from the Public Safety Committee tonight.
And committee is adjourned at 6:23 p.m.